So I'm here today with Doug Mainwaring, and I want to just thank you first off. I know you write for the LifeSite magazine, or the online magazine.
Right.
I love your articles.
Well, thank you.
Follow them all the time.
It's very kind of you to say.
Well, I look forward to them all the time. But so you write very much more so as a conservative person, socially conservative.
Yep.
How did you come to this position? Were you always at this position, that you were very socially conservative?
Not at all. In fact, my life has been just one sort of epiphany and transition after another. For instance, on abortion, I was totally agnostic until in 1994, when my wife and I adopted our first child. And it was holding him and rocking him to sleep that first week that suddenly a light went off in my head, and I thought, thank God his mom didn't abort this wonderful young child, and you know, and if I feel this way about the son in my arms, it's true of every other child who's at risk of being aborted. And so, you know, that was one thing, but my life has been characterized by those sorts of moments.
So how many children do you have?
We have two. We have two sons. Now their ages 25 and 23.
Now, were they both adopted, or?
Yeah, and this is kind of a neat story, because after we adopted our first child, after a little more than a year, we began to think about adopting again, and we finally got the paperwork rolling with the same agency, and within a few days, the head of the agency called and said, "You're not going to believe this, but Michael's birth mom, is 8 months pregnant by the same man, and they want you to have the child." So our kids, they're the only ones who are truly related by blood in the family. Yeah.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah, we couldn't have written the script any better than that.
So, but now at the same time, you have these two children, and you said they're 25 and 28 right now?
25 and 23.
25 and 23, okay. So I think then you would see the value of a family to these two children.
Totally.
But they didn't always, there was a time that was pretty much a jeopardy, is that correct?
That's right. When our kids were quite young, around 4 and 2, 3 and 1, somewhere in there, my wife and I separated. And that's a long story, I won't get into it. But yeah, we separated, and we ended up getting a divorce. And we're divorced for, 13 years, I think. So yeah, and but eventually we put our marriage back together again, and that too is a long story. But I'll tell you, my wife and I had lived apart for a very long time. I went off and lived as a gay man for most of those years. I became politically engaged at the very beginning of the Tea Party movement. I became a believer in conservative fiscal issues. And what I quickly realized, though, was that the reason we have all the fiscal issues we're facing in this country are the social problems, and one of them was the breakdown of the family. And so I had a change of heart over time, and eventually began to look for ways to put our marriage back together again. And by the grace of God, we were able to do that about 8 years ago.
Wow, that is so how did that work? I mean, because there are people that, we talk about the issue of needless divorce, and people that they get divorced and there's really no need to. They could have worked on their marriage. We've talked about issues where people have divorce regret. They get divorced and they say, you know what, maybe we should have tried harder. But it sounds to me, when I've been talking with you, that one of the driving issues as well was the fact about the family and what the family does for the children. Am I correct in assuming that? Or was there some other reason? I mean, that you weren't like all of a sudden longing for your wife, it was more the family structure? Is that, or tell me some of the way that worked?
Well, it's a vast, complex answer you're looking for.
Yeah.
But, you know, the short answer is that I quickly began to feel like a rat for what we had done to our kids by divorcing. And And it was later when our youngest was in middle school and the boys were living with me at that point, full-time. The youngest would go off and occasionally he'd spend a weekend with his friend's family.
Right.
They were a very loving Catholic family, very gregarious, emotive, and so forth. And he would come home Sunday night, and he wouldn't say anything specifically about this, but I could just tell he really liked being with that family. And I was pretty sure I could tell he regretted not having that to come home to.
Right.
And so that convicted me in my heart. And before that, there were times where our youngest, when he was still quite small, well before he started school, would get very angry and have tantrums and all. And, my wife and I would talk about, well, what should we do about him? We'd come together to talk about that. And again, I had to realize that he wasn't the problem. We were the problem because we had broken his happy home. And so there were, events, things that kept building and building and building to the point where I realized, boy, we made a big mistake. And no matter what it takes, we've got to find a way to repair the damage that we've done. So, and by the grace of God, we did.
Boy, that's pretty amazing. One of the things that I've tried to argue in talking about the issue of divorce is that too many people look at divorce as between two adults. My argument is marriage is for the children. Divorce is for adults or one adult. Put the children before the adults.
Absolutely.
And what you're telling me, from what I hear you saying, is that there was a big impact on the children because of a broken family.
It's unavoidable, yeah, and it inflicts great sadness on kids. And so this is my experience, if there's some silver lining to be found, is that it helped me to see that when I was provoked to become a marriage activist in the years leading up to the Supreme Court's Obergefell decision. And it was because I knew too many families like mine that had been broken because of the gay issue. And everybody always says, well, the kids will be all right, the kids will be fine. Well, that's a lie. The kids are never fine. They're never all right. It's always a huge tragedy. They get the tragedy of the separation and abandonment etched into their hearts, and it's hard to heal that. One of my friends years ago said correctly, and I thought it was a brilliant statement. She said that by divorcing, all we're doing is taking the stress. Adults are taking the stress in their lives and placing it on their kids.
Right.
And the adult feels free, and the kid just feels burdened to no end.
Well, Michael Reagan said this about divorce. He said divorce is when a parent picks up something and smashes it on the floor and says, pick it up, clean it up.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. And, because one of the things that Michael Reagan talked about, well, of course, his father was the one who signed no-fault divorce into being in California. And people have blamed Governor Reagan at the time for that. I found out afterwards that there was a lot of questioning that he did, and he something did not sit completely right with him, but he was lied to again and again and again. And he signed it because after inquiring again and again and having this lie put upon him again and again, children are resilient, children are happy if their parents are happy, a good divorce is better for the children than a difficult marriage, all of these different things. And yet he had the honesty and the integrity to realize at the end of his life that he told his son it was the worst decision that he ever did in public.
Right.